Ahmed, whenever you tell us, we're ready to go. So we wait for your cue.
Perfect. So let's wait for a couple more minutes.
Sure.
I think they're slowly joining in. So just to give you background,
Yes.
the Young Cultural Ambassador Program is this year in its fourth year, but it's slightly different than the previous years. Previously, we held the program in the DMV area, and the ambassadors participated in events personally, individually, and physically. And it was great, but it was also actually challenging because, as you know, commuting in the DMV area is not that easy. So, I mean, we got good participation, and in fact, this year we had repeat participants, but you know, it was definitely a challenge. So this year, with the COVID situation, initially we thought that we may not go ahead with the program. But then we said, hey, maybe this is an opportunity. Let's do this nationwide and see how it goes. And thanks to that, we have 27 young cultural ambassadors from across the US. So from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. We have high school students who are participating in the program. And they are varying grades in high school, from freshmen to seniors. And it has been a great experience for me so far. I learned a lot. I hope that they found it useful too. So this will be you're their third speaker. We had an introduction, orientation, and we had two additional speaker events, and now you are the third in line. So let's see, we have, they are commenting. So by the way, everybody, you can post your questions as we always do in the chat. Perfect chat box. So how many do we have? 20?
Looks like 22 total.
22, okay. Yeah, maybe like let's wait for one more minute. Some of them emailed us and told us beforehand that they have courses, activities, prior commitments tonight. But most of them will be here. And they also have assignments. So one of the assignments was for them to identify their representatives, local representatives. And then the second assignment was to communicate with the representatives, to send them a letter, an email, or letter in whatever format they choose, and raise a topic that they care about. And some of them already did that. They copied us. Is Dila here? Let's see, Dila Arat emailed Congressman Don Beyer, and he also got a response already, which we can share with everyone later. But Dilarat, I see that she's there.
Yes, hi.
Do you want to say a few words about your exchange with Congressman Beyer's office?
Yeah, sure. It was really cool how I emailed him and talked about my topic. I didn't expect a response back, but it was really cool.
And what was your topic?
It was about,
you want to tell us?
Yeah, homelessness and poverty, and how there should be more homeless shelters in our area.
Fantastic. Civic engagement is
and
really
they responded.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, our representatives are often more accessible than we give them credit for. You know, we sort of think of them as so separate from us, but in reality, we can write them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So definitely. So we'll gather these exchanges, collect them, and then maybe make it available for everyone to see at the end of the program. So they have a couple more assignments before they can graduate.
Mhm.
And their well, one assignment is for them to come up with ideas for local Turkish American associations to engage youth. And their final assignment will be to actually team up and then come up with an innovative idea to address a youth challenge that they see in, you know, in their neighborhood or beyond.
Right.
So maybe we can discuss about that too
Yeah,
today.
that
If
would
you
be
have
that.
ideas, you can share.
Absolutely, that sounds
So
really interesting.
yeah, so we're very excited. I think we can start. So, dear YCAs, we are delighted to have Rukmini Banerjee and John Dykes from HasNa today with us. HasNa is a very special organization. It was founded in 1998, right, by our dear friend Nevzar Stacy, who is someone that I look up to. She's a role model for many Turkish Americans in the area. And Nevzat is actually from Northern Cyprus, so she's a Turkish Cypriot, and you know, coming from a divided um, island, she, instead of just sitting back and complaining or, you know, doing nothing, she chose to establish organization and try to address these similar situations all around the world. And later on, when she got older, she retired, and then Rukmini continued and took the organization even further from where Nevzat left. And today we are honored to have both Rukmini and John here with us. So with that, I turn that over to you, Rukmini and John.
Right.
Okay.
So, hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Demet and ATADC, for giving us this opportunity to meet with this year's Young Cultural Ambassadors. As Demet, has already done the introductions, but I'm just quickly going to go over. So, I'm Rukmini, I'm the president of HasNa, and I have my colleague John Dykes here with me, who's a program associate also at HasNa.
If I can say something, interrupt here. So we prepared this PowerPoint presentation. Demet Hanım, I think you have to allow me to share my screen.
Oh, okay.
I will do that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then we can start there.
Okay, it is ready.
Okay, here we go. I'm opening it up.
Okay, so while John sets that up, I'm just going to quickly give you a little bit of a background. So today we're going to be walking you through what conflict resolution and conflict analysis is and how it developed as a field of study, and what role civil society organizations like HasNa can play in peace building, and also provide a brief snapshot of the geographic regions that we work in and the kinds of interventions that we have implemented in the past to address intergroup conflict. So as Demet mentioned, we were founded in 1998 by Mrs. Nevzat Stacy, who was Turkish American, and we are a small organization registered here in Washington, DC, and we pretty much work at the intersection of peace building and international development. So I'll let John start by telling you a little bit about our mission and vision before we actually jump into what conflict resolution is.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rukmini. So yes, and before I get into the vision and mission, I figured we would show you a little video here to give you a better idea of the activities that we do. And I'll have to open it here. Can everyone hear everything?
possible. I don't know. It is possible. What is possible? Living together is possible.
They have so many similarities in their way of thinking, in their preferences for food, for the way they cut their hair, the way they dance, the music they like, but they don't know it.
Bu HasNa'nın sayesinde biz gittik Washington'da hocalardan bu şeyleri gördük. Oradaki şeyler, buradaki insanlarımıza, çiftçilerimize anlatıyoruz. İşte
İnsanlık için, insanlık diyaloğu, insanlar arasındaki diyaloğu güçlendirme konusunda iyi bir şey yaptığına inanıyorum.
4 yaşında da olsa oğlumu dinlemeyi öğrendim.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope you found that video informative. Next, I'll move on to our vision, HasNa's vision. The vision is more or less what we want to see happen in the world, what we are trying to do. And that is to create and maintain positive peace in divided communities, leading to economic empowerment, equality, and justice. You know, it's a lofty goal, but we're here to try. And how do we do this? That is through a mission. And our mission is to facilitate cross-cultural understanding between communities divided along ethnic, religious, racial, gender, and national lines, and to reduce barriers to effective integration and positive peace. So with that, we'll go back to Rukmini. She'll tell you a little bit more about conflict analysis and resolution.
Right. So what exactly is conflict analysis and resolution? So at the most basic level, it's solving a problem. We all do it multiple times a day. We run into a problem or a conflict, and we try to come up with the most effective solution to resolve that problem. But conflict analysis and resolution as a field of study emerged between 1946 and 1969 in the aftermath of the Second World War, and also in conjunction with the Cold War and the decolonization period. So during this period, many new governmental and non-governmental actions contributed to the prevention of future wars by building transnational institutions and fostering reconciliations between countries that were former enemies. And the most important development was, of course, the establishment of the United Nations, and the associated international NGOs. However, workers in the field conducted research projects that involved the collection and analysis of a lot of data about interstate wars. And the research and theory that emerged out of this data collection focused on ways conflict can be overcome and be mutually beneficial, for the parties involved. So, for instance, identifying a common goal or a superordinate goal, as discussed by the social psychologist Muzaffar Sharif in 1966. And I want you to remember that name because I'm going to come back to him in a little bit. So during this period, conflict analysis and resolution centers emerged all over Europe, and they took a somewhat different form because they began to focus on peace and conflict research, which had often direct policy relevance. So the first such center, the International Peace Research Institute, or PRIO, was set up in Oslo, Norway in 1959 with the sociologist Johan Galtung as the director. So he founded the Journal of Peace Research at PRIO in 1964, and Galtung is actually widely considered to be the father of the academic peace and conflict research field.
Okay, thank you for that, Rukmini. So the next question is, what is civil society? It's not something that's clear cut. When you were looking at this presentation today, you might think, what does civil society actually mean? So, like I said, it's not that clear cut. It's not black and white. There are different definitions of civil society used in academia, in media, in the public, and overall, just in general. But generally, including for the United Nations, it's often considered the third sector of society. So with government on one side, business being another, and then civil society are the actors, organizations, movements in between. They are diverse groups that are centered around various causes, values, shared interests, and sometimes their interests can align, sometimes they can conflict. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But overall, when we think about civil society, we can think that there are charities, development, non-governmental organizations. We have women's organizations, faith-based groups, right-based groups, labor unions. Some would consider academia to be part of the civil society. So it's a wide group with diverse interests and so the role of civil society in peace building, it can often give voices to marginalized or minority communities, and it can advocate for change. It can bring issues onto the radar of the government, or it can bring it onto the radar of businesses and attract money. It can take up media time and influence the general public. But it's still not clear. So, what about lobbying groups that are funded completely by a government? Or what about a nonprofit that is funded completely by a business? So they do represent a space for pluralism, different ideas, and they can shape the ways in which government and private industry do business. So we, for example, as HasNa, we are part of the civil society. We are a civil society organization. ATA DC could also be considered as a civil society organization for sure. And I'll turn it back to Rukmini here.
Right. So I wanted to focus on a specific theory within the field of conflict resolution known as the realistic conflict theory. So Muzaffar Sharif, I mentioned him a little while ago, was a Turkish-American social psychologist who helped develop the realistic conflict or group conflict theory in 1961. His theory states that inner group conflicts, negative prejudices, and stereotypes are a result of competition between groups for limited resources. And to test this hypothesis, Sharif actually carried out one of his most famous experiments known as the Robbers Cave experiment. So what exactly was this experiment like? So this field experiment comprised two groups of 12-year-old boys and was conducted in Roberts Cave State Park in Oklahoma in the 1950s. So the 22 boys participating in the study were strangers to one another. They came from largely white middle-class backgrounds. And at the camp, the groups were kept separate from each other and encouraged to bond as two individual groups through the pursuit of common goals that required teamwork and cooperation. The boys grew very attached to their respective groups over this first phase, and each group developed its own cultures and norms. Now, in the second phase of the experiment, which was known as the competition stage, the two groups were brought into competition with each other in conditions that would create frustration or conflict between them. So, for example, they were made to participate in a series of competitive games such as baseball, tug of war, etc. And a trophy was awarded to the winning team, and there was no consolation prize given to the losers. And this created serious division between the groups. And initially, the conflict began with verbal expressions of prejudice, but before long, it transformed into more direct expressions of hostility. And in one instance, one of the boys actually even burned the rival group's flag. So the researchers then gave all the boys a 2-day cooling off period and asked them to list the characteristics of the two groups. And it was found that each group had higher evaluations for their own group and characterized the other group in very unfavorable terms. So in order to ease this tension between the two groups, Sharif then provided them with a common or superordinate goal that encouraged the two rival groups to work together in order to accomplish something that would be beneficial to both the groups. So for instance, when the water supply to the camp failed, the camp staff blamed it on vandals. But when they investigated the water lines extensively, they found that the tanks were full, but somebody had stuffed a sack into the faucet through which the water flowed. So all the boys gathered around the faucet to try to clear it. And then when the water finally came through, they all collectively rejoiced because now the entire camp was going to get water, and it was not a competition. This was for the common good. So Muzaffar Sharif's theory actually has also, it's worth mentioning here that the theory has been criticized on certain ethical grounds like, lack of protection from physical or psychological harm for the participants and also deception of the participants. But in many ways, the realistic conflict theory also comes across as being a little limiting because it discounts additional factors that often play a role in conflict, like racial, ethnic, economic differences, and also ignores the question of identity, which is often, inextricably entwined with this competition for resources. But however, despite this sociocultural, uniformity of the two groups, what seemed to be an effective technique for bringing them together was the creation of this common or superordinate goal. And by identifying a problem lying outside their collective identity or competition for resources, such as, environmental problems, or in the case of the Roberts Cave experiment, the breakdown of the water supply, conflicting groups are able to come together and solve a problem that affects everyone. Next slide, please. So many of HasNa's programs are also actually guided by this notion of a superordinate goal, whether it is eco-journalism, agricultural training, or helping women in business. We attempt to bring together individuals from different ethnic communities and give them a tangible skill, which is based on the assumption that in the long run, these skills will empower them to collectively combat an issue that has an impact on everybody's lives. So over the years, we've identified many such superordinate goals, but there are still many that can be addressed. But there are some key principles that characterize our model. So I'll just give you a little bit of an overview on that. The first one, of course, is collaboration. So collaboration among individuals and communities through building personal and organizational relationships. And we also provide training and conflict resolution, and of course, professional development forms the crux of our capacity building trainings. The second principle is local partnership, to identify and customize programs according to local needs. So we always do a needs assessment in partnership with the local organization before implementing. Thirdly, diversity in program participants. So we bring them from varying cultural, social, and economic backgrounds. And lastly, sustainability, by ensuring that participants act as local leaders and go back to their communities and become change makers or change agents, creating long-term sustainable solutions. John, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Rukmini. So I am just inserting this slide here as a little disclaimer. You know, we're talking here about conflict. And so the topics that we are going to be discussing here, we're going to be talking about them in an unbiased view. They're very complex, and they can often lead to heated debate in Turkey or in the region. And we just wanted to, you know, let everyone know. So now the question is where we work. So here's a map of Turkey here. You know, to the west and south, we have the Mediterranean Sea, we have the European Union and Greece further west, Black Sea to the north and Russia, the Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan to the east, Middle East more to the south. So it isn't a complex geography with a lot of actors around. It used to be the Ottoman Empire. The Turkish Republic is the, you know, came out of the Ottoman Empire on the Anatolian Peninsula. Yeah, but we work in Cyprus. That is one of our oldest program areas. And Southeast Turkey is another one. And we'll go into these each in more detail as we go on. We also work between Turkey and Armenia. And recently, our most recent program area is between Syria and Turkey, and working with Syrian refugees in Turkey in particular. So, first area of, and the oldest areas of HasNa's programming is Cyprus. So as you can see here, I put a map here of Cyprus. It's divided between a Turkish north and a Greek south. It's divided by the UN buffer zone, the green line. The history of the island, it was a British protectorate and a colony from 1878 to 1960, at which time it declared independence. Up until this time, there were Turks and Greeks, Muslims and Christians living on the island in different communities. There's, you know, with their different religious, ethnic, linguistic backgrounds. And then there was a conflict, more or less, that first started to erupt after Cypriot independence, which occurred in 1960. So it happened in 1964, and then once again in 1974. And 1974 is where the conflict froze. So at this point, like I said earlier, there is the Turkish Cypriot in the north and the Greek Cypriot, Greek Cyprus in the south. There have been multiple attempts to reunify the island or to solve the conflict. In 2003, there was the Kofi Annan plan and the referendum for the reunification of Cyprus. This included, well, it ended up resulting, it was not successful. The Turkish North accepted, they voted yes to reunify, the Greek South voted not to unify. But however, also at 2003, this green zone between the two sides of the island was opened. So people were able to cross these areas for the first time. EU membership, Cyprus has also become an EU member, and it was entered into the EU under the Greek Cypriot government. The Turkish Cypriot government is not recognized by any other country besides Turkey. Trans-Montana talks more recently were attempted to try to come to a solution to create a bi-communal federation that would be one state. And unfortunately, they did not succeed. And then also more recently, you might have heard about the energy disputes that are currently happening in the Eastern Mediterranean. And that just so happens to be where Cyprus is located. And then we also have COVID-19, which saw the closure of the buffer zone again to limit traffic and people moving between the north and the south. So that has been another area that could potentially increase conflict or has been seen as sort of problematic. But now I'll give it to Rukmini and she will talk about some of our programs in Cyprus.
So we've implemented a number of programs in Cyprus over the years, but I wanted to talk to you about two main programs. The first one is the bicommunal Cyprus radio program known as Talk of the Island. So we initiated this bicommunal radio program in 2005. And the purpose of this program was to foster understanding, communication, and respect between the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots. And in 2006, this program received its first significant grant from the United States Institute of Peace, which allowed the bicommunal radio show to adopt high technology radio lines and phone lines, and made it the first place apart from the UN, which was allowed to operate radio lines on both sides of the island. So that was pretty cool. And then the second project that I wanted to talk to you about was the Cyprus Friendship Program, or CFP, which we initiated back in 2009. And this was a groundbreaking volunteer program launched in 2009, and it brought teenagers from the Greek Cypriot and the Turkish Cypriot communities to the United States for a 4-week visit. And they were hosted by American families. And the purpose of the program was to forge lasting friendships between them while developing leadership skills, engaging in community service, and embracing civic responsibility. So the success and popularity of this program actually led to the creation of a whole new independent nonprofit known as Cyprus Friendship Program, which is now actually recently kind of rebranded themselves and expanded the scope of their programming. And now they've kept the same acronym, but they're now called Creating Friendships for Peace. And they have also expanded their programming to include youth from Israel and Palestine. So they do exchange programs in that region as well. Back to John.
Thank you. So the next main area of our programming is Southeastern Turkey. And so, as I said before, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the establishment of the Turkish Republic, there were many ethnicities, cultures, linguistic groups, people speaking different languages within the territory of the Ottoman Empire. But then Turkey, came out and they had to begin a process of state building and nation building. And it often centered around notions of Turkishness. However, there were some minorities, including the Kurds, which are still in Turkey, and they are a sizable population in Turkey, Iran, Syria, right now, even going up to Armenia and Azerbaijan, and Iraq. So conflict. In 1984, there was an uprising among a Kurdish branch of, it's called the PKK, and it is branded as a terrorist organization by the United States, European Union, Turkey. There were multiple lives that were lost, estimates around 40 to 100,000, around 3 million people were displaced. Another reason why we are working in Southeast Turkey, aside from ethnic conflict, is due to underdevelopment of the region. Not necessarily as much access to wealth, education, jobs, infrastructure in the region as perhaps in other areas. But there has been hope in the Turkey-Kurdish conflict as well. The peace process in 2013, 2015, a resolution process started to begin, and there were hopes that it would sort of advance this conflict or help to work to have the Turks and Kurds working together. However, in 2015, it has been indefinitely suspended. So I will let Rukmini talk about some of our programs in Southeastern Turkey.
So one of our longest running programs in Southeastern Turkey were our farm extension programs. As John mentioned, Southeastern Turkey has historically seen ethnic tension between the Turkish and Kurdish communities. So the goal of HasNa's farm extension programs was to diffuse this ethnic tension and build peace between the two communities through a farm extension system or an agricultural training and support system, which has the potential to increase agricultural productivity and to bring mutually beneficial economic gains as a result of cooperation across ethnic lines. So HasNa partnered with the University of Maryland's College of Agriculture and Natural Resources to conduct a 2-week training program on vegetable and fruit production, irrigation management, water management, and this continued year after year for several years. Another project that we undertook in Southeastern Turkey was leadership training for Turkish NGOs fighting against gender-based violence. So in 2015, HasNa brought 11 representatives, both Turkish and Kurdish, from women's NGOs in Turkey for training on nonprofit management, leadership skills, and communication skills to promote women's empowerment in their communities. The participants attended workshops at HasNa as well as at other American NGOs geared toward helping women become change agents in their communities. And then the following year, in 2016, we actually implemented the second phase of this project, where we partnered with the Men Engage Alliance in Europe and held a training program in Istanbul, which focused specifically on engaging men and boys in combating gender-based violence. So now we move on to our next geographic region.
Yes, our next geographic region is Armenia. And this is a picture of the Armenian-Turkish border near Yerayuk. And once again, start with a little bit of background and history. This is nothing too in-depth. So following World War I and the collapse of the empire, before then, there were, multiple ethnicities, once again, Turks, Kurds, Armenians that were occupying the Anatolian Peninsula, living in the Anatolian Peninsula. Following World War I, there was a mass exodus of ethnic Armenians from the Ottoman Empire. And so this has led to conflict that still can be seen today. Armenians' inclusion in the Soviet Union sort of put a freeze on the conflict for a while, but now after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War, and the independence of Azerbaijan and Armenia, there have been some border disputes. I'm sure you might have seen in the news recently the Nagorno-Karabakh disputes. It's a dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And what a lot of people don't realize is that Azerbaijan is actually a Turkic country. They speak more or less Turkish, and they have very close relations with Turkey. So this has also pulled Turkey into the conflict a little bit. Armenian diaspora is also quite large, especially in the United States. For example, LA, Los Angeles, is the second biggest Armenian population outside of Armenia. And the peace process. Once again, in the early 2010s, there were signs that the relations between Turkey and Armenia were warming, that the borders could potentially open or that trade could be normalized. This is sort of seen as starting off in 2008 when the presidents joined together to watch a football match, or soccer, I guess, in the US, and could be called soccer diplomacy, football diplomacy. But as of late, there has not been much progress made in bettering relations between Armenia and Turkey. So I'll turn it to Rukmini.
Right. So one of the projects that we did for the Turkey-Armenia area focus was called Side by Side Digital Stories. This project was implemented in 2013 to forge cross-cultural links between Turkish and Armenian youth, and to give them an opportunity to create digital resources that can act as tangible proof of their cooperation. So we brought 6 Turkish and 6 Armenian youth who were selected through a rigorous selection process, and then they came to the US for a 2-week training program that focused on conflict resolution training as well as on digital and visual storytelling methods. And at the end of their training program, there was an exhibition where the participants got a chance to sort of display the products that they had created. So there were photos, film screenings, sound presentations, and all this was hosted at Busboys and Poets right here in Washington, DC. And the second project, which was also a youth project, youth and peace building project, was called Volunteer Initiative in Turkey and Armenia, or VITA. And this was implemented in 2014. So we found through our research and needs assessment on the ground that the culture of civic engagement and volunteerism was quite low in Turkey and Armenia. So this project aimed to promote volunteerism and cross-cultural connections between Turkish and Armenian youth. So during the 2-week training program held in the US, 6 Armenian and 6 Turkish teenagers learned firsthand about volunteerism from organizations based here in the US. Following the completion of the US leg of the program, the VITA participants designed and organized service programs throughout their own communities in the border regions of Turkey and Armenia. And this included various types of projects like painting, gardening, cleaning public spaces, and also helping other young people in their community start their own volunteer initiatives.
All right, and the final program area that we are currently working in is Syrian refugees in Turkey. So This map shows more or less the distribution of Syrian refugees that are living in Turkey right now. The darker red are areas where there are more refugees, and the lighter pinkish areas are where there are less. So you can see that they're also distributed around the southeast, going up into the bigger cities, Bursa, Istanbul, Izmir as well. So a little bit of history. The Syrian conflict that began against, as a protest against Bashar al-Assad has sort of devolved, or it has devolved into a civil war. In 2011 was when Turkey saw its first Syrian refugees crossing into Turkey, and they were welcomed with an open door policy, which has been praised by many because, you know, in the end, they're fleeing war and violence. Nearly 4 million Syrian refugees live in Turkey right now. Turkey is now hosting more refugees than any other country in the world. And, you know, this has caused some very large challenges for Turkey. So, for example, many of the refugees aren't necessarily staying in Turkey, but they would like to cross to the European Union. This has led to human smuggling, boats overturning in the Mediterranean, deaths, and it has had an effect on Turkish-EU relations as well. And something we have to think about too when we think about refugees in Turkey, which we don't necessarily think about with, it's not something we usually think about, it is that they're urban refugees. They're not necessarily all living in camps. The vast majority of refugees are living with Turkish communities in these cities and in these provinces. They're not completely separated. So they're living among their Turkish hosts. And there are certain challenges to social cohesion. There have been signs of political parties, political representatives that are speaking out against Syrian refugees. Turkey's economy is not necessarily doing the best right now, and there have also been reports that Syrian refugees are receiving some blame for the economic woes. And like I mentioned, there are also international implications from hosting such a large amount of refugees. And unfortunately, there are also increases in reports of violence against refugees in Turkey. So this is one of the reasons that we began to work in this area. And it sort of began in 2013 when we partnered up with Kamer, which is a civil society organization in Southeast Turkey, and ran a needs assessment called Syrian Refugees, the Excluded. And here we went and interviewed about 214 refugee women who represented their households and their families, and asked them, you know, what they needed. Were they able to find work? Were they able to get medicine? I should have also mentioned too that the policy towards Syrian refugees right now in Turkey, they are offered work permits and they have access to employment, they have access to medical care. So that's something that we should keep in mind. It's been praised by a lot of humanitarian organizations. So this led to our most recent activity, which is we launched the Turkey Refugee Response Initiative. And this started out of sort of wanting to understand how COVID-19 and coronavirus has affected refugees living in Turkey who are already very vulnerable. So we've had interviews with over 30 representatives of civil society, some politicians, or not politicians, municipality leaders, academics, and we had written a report, and you can find that at HasNa.org. And then also we have held webinars with civil society organizations to discuss how to help the refugees currently in Turkey. And yeah, that brings us to the next stage, which is a game that we had planned. So just to lighten it up a little bit. So what I would ask everybody to do right now is unmute your microphones, and we're going to play a little game. It's a game about mediation. And so there are two angry neighbors, and I will start it here. Okay, yeah, so I'll read the instructions. It shouldn't take too long. Just unmute your microphones. So you're about to witness a nasty argument between two neighbors. They both have asked you to help them resolve the dispute before things get even worse. When the argument begins, a stop button will appear. Here's the stop button. Your challenge will be to find the best place to click stop and interject yourself into the argument. If you interrupt them too soon, oops, sorry, there's an ad. If you interrupt them too soon or too frequently, you won't get anywhere. So they need to express their points of view. However, if you let things get out of control, there will come a point when they're so angry that they'll no longer be possible for you to stop them. At that point, in the mediation will be out of control and you will have failed. So pay attention. So yeah, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna click continue and I'm gonna wait until I hear stop from some of you, okay?
What the gnawing varmint? My neighbor Sonia is responsible for this. I feel like going over there and knocking her lights out, but I'm a cop. My job is to serve and protect. I could sue her, but that's expensive and takes a lot of time. I think it's possible that we could negotiate a settlement. How would you like to act as a mediator between us?
Okay, let's do it.
I have 3 estimates from professional gardeners ranging from $7,000 to $11,000 to cleanse the earth and replace the plants.
That's ridiculous. How can he spend that kind of money on plants when there are homeless people starving?
You hypocritical sack of snakes. If you gave one whit about starving homeless people, you wouldn't be so fat.
Oh, that's my phone. I'll be right back.
I don't hear any phone.
You don't? I'll just go check.
No. If you leave, we're finished, and I'll see you in court.
Good. I think we're done then.
Please butt out. Not until you compensate me for
I'm not going to compensate you.
Why not?
Because you're so rude.
Oh, you think I'm rude, do you? Well, push me and you'll see I'm also mean and vindicative.
Vindictive.
What?
Vindicated is not a word. You mean either vindictive or vindicated, and you certainly have not been vindicated.
Oh, I haven't, have I? I don't think you know me well enough to make that
Jim,
claim.
try to avoid using big words you don't understand.
I know what vindicated means. I've got the scar.
Oh yeah? Can I see it?
Don't flatter yourself, you fat cow.
Get out.
Fine. I'll see you in court.
So guys, I didn't hear anyone say stop. I didn't hear anyone say anything. So yeah, now he's gonna sue her.
Should we one more time?
It escalated too quickly.
Yeah, but
it did escalate too quickly. So
but
now that we
saw
know
that
it's
sign.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was that sign there. It said it's too late to intervene.
Yeah.
So I guess.
So let's give it one more shot. And so I've played this before. I'll give you a warning. You have to do it a little quicker than you might think. You have to interject a little bit quicker than you might think. So I'm going to press try again, and we'll do it.
The minute, sorry, can I just say, like the minute you see that there's some sort of unpleasantness on either side, your job as a mediator is to keep the peace. So remember that, and remember to interject as soon as you see that somebody's being hostile, okay? And you can also raise your hand or just say stop, and John will immediately stop.
I have 3 estimates from professional gardeners ranging from $7,000 to $11,000 to cleanse the earth and replace the plants.
That's ridiculous. How can he spend that kind of money on plants when there are homeless people starving?
You hypocritical sack of snakes.
Stop. Yeah, stop.
It looks like you guys got it just in time. So what are we going to do? Are we going to insist that there be no name calling? Are we going to agree with Sonia that those are outrageous estimates? Or are we going to ask Sonia how much she spends helping the homeless?
Insist.
Insist there'll be no name calling? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
I'm sorry. It's just really difficult to sit back and listen to her twist the facts so that she's on the moral high ground after committing planticide.
Planticide?
Yes. The wanton extinction of plant life with malice of foresight.
Planticide is not a word, you ignoramus.
If I am
Stop.
There you go. Good job, guys. Again, yeah. So next, now what do? Ask them both to refrain from making personal attacks, then ask Sonia to tell her side of the story. Do we tell Jim that to the best of your knowledge, planticide is not a crime comparable to murder? Do we ask them if it's important that they improve their relationship? Or do we ask Sonia how much money she spends helping the homeless?
Refrain from making personal attacks.
Less personal attacks.
Personal attacks, you think? Less personal attacks? Okay, let's do it. Let's try it.
Sure, I've just lost my job and I've got enough on my plate. Our backyard has to be clean and no maintenance. I've done the back and patio stones, and it's a very clean aesthetic that I'm after. So you can imagine how frustrating it is when his creeping vines keep bursting through all over to my side of the fence.
You can't totally control plants.
Why not? You're a cop, aren't you? You're a control freak. Too bad you're not humbled by the fact you're such a failure.
Shut up your gaping maw, you bat cow.
Get out!
Fine, I'll see you in court.
Well, we just missed it. Just missed it.
Oh, we were very close.
Yeah. So I think it's like Rukmini said, you know, right the second that you see any ounce of hostility, then we have to stop it. So yeah, I'll turn it back here. So at this point, you know, we could either do another round or you could ask us questions. It's up to you all.
I know that I saw there was one question in the chat box. Also, I just want to put it out there, you know, if you have any questions that come up later, please feel free to email us, contact us anytime, follow us on social media, tweet at us, you know, send us a DM on Facebook, whatever you want, and we'd be happy to answer your questions anytime. And I know that there was one question in the chat box. Would the social experiment with 12-year-olds still be legal today? I think that they would definitely have to get a lot of consent. I mean, I don't know what process Muzaffar Sharif had to go through at that time to, you know, since they were all minors, they were 12-year-olds, I'm sure the parents had to be involved in some way, so that there would have to be due diligence before something like this was even sanctioned, and especially involving kids. So yeah, I'm sure, you know, that's a question that's what I don't have a direct answer for you, but yes, with the required consent forms and the sanctions and the protections for the kids, it might have been legal, but I would have to do more research on that. And also, are there any more relevant social experiments? I find them very interesting. So there's constantly in the field of conflict resolution, there's experiments, there's negotiations, simulations, all of that happening. I'm happy to direct you to some resources where you can get more information on such experiments that continue, but obviously they have to abide by certain ethical and more, you know, social standards of you know, behavioral psychology, social psychology. So a lot of this study on intergroup relations and multiculturalism and conflict is actually also falls within the purview of psychology, which is why, as you saw, Muzaffar Sharif was a social psychologist. So for that, yes, there are experiments and there are sanctioned experiments. And I'm happy to, you know, sort of, I can send the resources to Demet and she can forward them to you after this presentation is over.
I'll be happy to.
Question, can you tell us about volunteer and internship programs at HasNa? Yes, we definitely have internship programs. This year, because of COVID, we actually did not host any interns just because we didn't think that we would be able to make use of them very well. And most of our programming this year was just research and webinars anyway. But normally we do host an intern in the fall, and we host one one in summer and one in fall. So we host 2 interns a year, and it's a paid internship actually. And but we mostly host interns from at the undergrad and graduate school level. So, but we are always looking for volunteers for our projects as well. So, if you follow us on social media, I'm pretty sure that at some point or the other, you will see a call for applications for volunteers, interns, just stay tuned. John, did you want to take any of these questions?
I'm trying to find
They're
them.
in the chat box. I can take
okay, look, here they popped up. Okay, great. Wait.
Okay,
no,
let
Rukmini,
me
you can
go for this. Yeah. So how should I go about getting more involved in my community? I live in a very small town and there are not many options outside of school. I think one of the things that I can say is that if you can get a few friends who are as interested in getting involved in your community as you are, just form your group and be the change you want to see. We've encouraged volunteerism and community service through our youth and peace building projects, and we've encouraged youth to be entrepreneurial in their approach and develop their own initiatives. And feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we'd be happy to talk to you about how you could start something like that in your community and give you some point you to resources or mentors who could help you. So we'd be happy to help you with that. The next question is, how can I educate my community about using conflict resolution and mediation? So I think that games like these would be useful. There are many on the internet. Again, we'd be happy to share more resources with you. There are also a lot of online courses. If you just go on YouTube and search for conflict resolution training or mediation training, I'm sure you'll get a lot of videos. So that would be a good starting point. And then, of course, there are much more academic resources that I could direct you to. But for beginners, for people who are just getting acquainted with the field of mediation and conflict resolution, there's a lot of free stuff out there on the internet. Use them. And then the last one is from Demet. How is HasNa financed? So right now, most of our funding comes from Nebzer's private family foundation. So Nebzer's brother, Bulent Gulistan, he owns a company in California, Los Angeles, California, called FTC, Fastener Technology Corporation. He actually passed away in 2015, but FTC gives us a big endowment every year, which is our main source of funding. And then other than that, the rest of our funding comes from individual contributions from donors and supporters based in DC and also a few in Turkey. And they're mostly all part of Nebzer's personal social network. And then we also do annual solicitation campaigns at the end of the year where we, solicit smaller contributions from the DMV area, and we send out our newsletter and we send out information on what we've done all year. And then, people who are interested in our work, who want to support our work moving forward, donate to the solicitation campaign. So that's how we get our funding.
And I can say this year too, watch us on social media, sign up to our mail list at hasna.org. Our solicitation this year, annual solicitation this year, is going to take a different form. And yeah, we're excited about it.
I actually have one more question for you both. So what kind of background do you guys have? I mean, what do, students need to study to get involved in this field?
Sure. So I actually moved to the US. I'm from India originally. And I moved to the US in 2012 to go to graduate school here. And I did my master's. I did a Master of Arts in Conflict Resolution from Georgetown University right here in DC. So I graduated from Georgetown in 2014. And while I was in the graduate program, so Georgetown has a summer field fellowship program where they select 6 students from the program and give them a fellowship, a sort of a lump sum, and then we have the freedom to go and work in any country of the world as long as we're able to set up an internship there. So when I got that fellowship in the summer of 2013, I decided to go to Turkey and work in Ankara with the Turkish Red Crescent Society on their Syrian refugee response operations. And that's how my work with Turkey, my association with Turkey started. And then after I graduated from the conflict resolution program, one of my professors in Georgetown told me about HasNa and about the work that they do. And they were looking for a program assistant at the time, so I applied, and that's how I started working at HasNa about 6.5 years ago. And it's been a pretty crazy journey since then, but it's been very fulfilling too. So that's my background, my academic background. And John has a much closer connection to Turkey, actually. So I'll let him tell you about that.
Well, yeah, I'm from Littleton, Colorado. Originally, I'm from Littleton, Colorado. Grew up there, went to the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I got a degree in international affairs and German. And then during that time, I was really interested in Germany, learning about German, and I started to learn about the biggest migrant community in Germany, and they are Turks. And so from there, I went back, finished my undergraduate so I studied abroad in Germany, came back, and then I applied for the Fulbright program. And I was an English teaching assistant in Germany. And there I worked with migrant families, not only from Turkey, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, European Union, Russia, Turkey, Middle East. And that was my primary focus during that time. And then it was during that time when I said, I've learned a lot about Germany, but I want to learn more about Turkey, this other area that I'm so interested in. And so I applied for a master's program. It's called the German-Turkish Master of the Arts in Social Sciences. And I pretty much just Googled German-Turkish Master's Program, and that's what popped up. And I applied, and luckily I was accepted. And that it took place 1 year in Ankara, and then the second year in Germany. And it was a program that was based around social sciences that was very interdisciplinary. I had an international affairs background. My friend had a religion background. My other friend had a Armenian studies background, Turkish studies background, political science, everyone. And it was 13 of us about. And and then I stayed in Turkey, and I loved it. And I lived there for over 5 years in Ankara, Turkey. And then I was working as an editor for a think tank. So I was editing their English, and it was great. And then I came back here, came to Colorado, and then I moved to DC, and I've started working at HasNa with Rukmini.
Fascinating stories, both of you. Wow, what a wealth of knowledge and experience. Thank you so much for sharing those. I hope they will be an inspiration for our students.
Yeah, I would say also, if any of you students, if you ever have any questions about anything like that, choosing schools, looking at scholarships, the Fulbright, any of that stuff, you can always write us at the email address we gave you too.
Perfect. I will share your contact information with the students.
Great.
And by the way, we have an Indian American participant, Nawal, right? She has been to Turkey and really liked it. And this year she applied for the program.
Great.
So just wanted to highlight that. I mean, most of the students are Turkish Americans, but there are some that do not have any Turkish background, which we are very happy about. Well, this was wonderful. We learned definitely a lot from you. I'm definitely looking forward to the background information you will share with us. And we'll definitely pass them on to the students. We recorded this video, so we will share the recording with the students, but we can share it with you as well.
Yeah, that would be great. We'd love to keep it.
Wonderful. And I think we've come to the end of the time that is allocated to
Yes.
this program. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we
Thank you
look
for having
forward to
us.
staying in touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Demet, and thank you, Ata DC, for inviting us. We really enjoyed our interaction, and I hope you enjoyed, learning about civil society and conflict resolution. And like we said, please feel free to reach out anytime you want.
Thank you both. And I think this is such an important topic, conflict resolution, especially in the world that we live in. We see more and more conflicts all around the world. And as we have experienced, they just, they start maybe as small disagreements, and then all of a sudden they escalate, and then it's too difficult to turn them back. So your skills and what you're doing is very critical. These are difficult issues. I know many Turks are even afraid to discuss these topics. So we're just so glad that you're working on it and making a change one person at a time.
Yep, we're
Thank you
hoping.
for all that you're doing.
No, thanks. Thank
It's our
you.
pleasure.
Wonderful. So
Okay,
we'll
with
see you
that,
again.
yeah, hope to see you again and stay in touch. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.